During a family cruise, 7-year-old Andrew suddenly vanished without a trace. Then, out of nowhere, 10 years later, he reappeared, and what he said to his family left everyone completely stunned. The Hart family was finally going on the long-awaited cruise trip that had taken them months to plan for. Andrew Hart, who was just 7 years old, was thrilled to board the Majestic Caribbean, a ship larger than anything he had ever seen. It had decks, pools, restaurants, and even a huge water slide. Everything felt magical, like a floating amusement park. Andrew clutched his stuffed penguin, Mister Waddles, as he explored. The cruise began without issue, but on that first night aboard the ship, things took a horrible turn. Around 7:40 p.m., a loud explosion shook the ship, sending passengers into a panic. People screamed, some fell, others grabbed their loved ones, terrified that the ship was sinking. Thick smoke filled the air, and alarms blared. Crew members rushed to calm the passengers, but in the chaos, Andrew disappeared. Susan Hart, Andrew's mother, had been holding his hand just moments before. They had been walking to dinner when the explosion occurred. In the confusion, Andrew vanished. Susan searched desperately, calling his name, but he was nowhere to be found. Then, she spotted Mr. Waddles, lying near a railing. If Andrew had wandered off, he would have had his penguin. Susan's heart sank. Something was terribly wrong. The ship's security team reviewed the footage, which revealed something chilling. Just before the explosion, a man in a baseball cap was seen leading Andrew away, looking over his shoulder as if making sure no one was watching. Andrew didn't seem scared. He followed the man willingly. Then, at exactly 7:45 p.m., the explosion occurred, and the cameras went dark for 3 minutes. When the footage resumed, the man and Andrew were gone. The next day, the ship docked in Miami, and the search for Andrew officially began. News stations broadcasted Andrew's image, and his parents appeared on TV, pleading for help. Their son was missing, and the world was watching. Then, something strange happened. Among the passengers was Dr. Emma Peters, a child psychologist. After the ship docked, her daughter Emily started acting strangely. One night, while they were having dinner in their cabin, Emily's silence grew unbearable. Her mother noticed and decided to say something about it. "Emily, sweetheart, what's wrong? You've barely touched your food all day." Emily stared down at her plate, her hands shaking slightly. "I saw him, Mom. The man with the camera," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Dr. Peters froze, her heart racing. "What man? What happened, honey?" Emily looked around the room nervously. "He told Andrew to come with him. Then there was a loud noise, like an explosion, and Andrew wasn't there anymore." Shaken, Dr. Peters contacted Officer Maria Garcia, who was investigating the case. Garcia had seen many things during her career in cruise ship security, but nothing like this. "Officer Garcia," Dr. Peters said over the phone, her voice urgent. "My daughter saw the man with the camera talking to Andrew right before the explosion. We need to look into this," Garcia replied, her tone serious. "I'll look into it right away, Dr. Peters. Something doesn't sit right with me about this. The explosion might have been a distraction." Garcia had seen enough over the years to know when something was planned. She brought in John Kumar, a cybersecurity expert, to examine the ship's surveillance. John's voice came through the phone, tense with disbelief. "Maria, you're not going to like this. The cameras were hacked. At exactly the moment of the explosion, the footage goes black. It's like someone knew when to strike." Garcia's voice was filled with dread. "It's all connected. Whoever took Andrew knew exactly what they were doing." Garcia and her team worked with the FBI, offering a large reward for any information, but all leads turned into dead ends. The man with the camera remained a mystery. No one knew who he was, and he had never checked in as a passenger. There were no records, no trace of him anywhere. It was as if he had never existed. Then, one day, Officer Garcia made a chilling discovery while reviewing old missing child cases. "Maria, you need to hear this." John Kumar's voice was tight over the phone. "I've been digging into other disappearances, and there's a pattern." "What do you mean?" Garcia asked, leaning forward. "Other kids from different cruise ships, all disappeared before major distractions. Explosions, fires, power outages, and every time the children vanished without a trace. Garcia paused, the gravity of the revelation sinking in. So this isn't just about Andrew. There's a bigger plan at play. A cold shiver ran down her spine as she realized the scope of the operation. Who's behind this? And where is Andrew now? She hated that she couldn't answer her own questions. The morning after Andrew Hart was kidnapped, he woke up in an unfamiliar place. The air smelled salty, the ceiling was wooden, and he lay on a rough straw mattress. The sound of waves crashing was distant, and people spoke in a language he didn't understand. His head ached, and his body felt heavy, as though he had been asleep for ages. Andrew's head was pounding, and his body felt heavy. His eyes fluttered open, and he saw a woman standing over him, speaking in a language he didn't understand. "Antonio, hijo, estás despierto," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. Andrew blinked, confused. "I'm not Antonio. My name is Andrew. Where am I?" The woman looked at him with kind, brown eyes, her weathered face showing a mix of concern and relief. "You're safe now. We found you during a storm, washed up on the shore. You were barely alive. My name is Lucia, and this is my husband, Diego." Andrew's heart raced as he tried to sit up, his mind still hazy. "I don't remember. What happened? Where's my mom?" Diego stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. "You're in a small fishing village in Colombia. You've been with us for a while now, but you've been sick. You were unconscious for days." "But I was with my mom. We were on a cruise ship." Andrew's voice wavered, his memories beginning to swirl in his mind like fog. Lucia sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "The ship was caught in a terrible storm. We found you alone, holding onto a piece of fabric, a toy. We thought you were lost forever, but now you're here with us." Andrew shook his head, feeling a pang of confusion. No, I'm Andrew. I need to find my mom. Please, where is she?" Lucia's eyes softened, and she exchanged a glance with Diego. "We don't know what happened to your mother, hijo, but you are safe here. You are part of our family now." Andrew stared at them, trying to comprehend what they were saying. "But I don't remember." Diego nodded slowly. "It's okay, son. You've been through a lot. Don't worry. We'll take care of you." The words felt comforting, but Andrew's heart ached. Over time, his memories of his old life faded, and whenever vague images of a cruise ship or a woman with blonde hair appeared, Diego and Lucia assured him it was just a dream. By 17, Andrew had fully embraced his life in the village. He worked on fishing boats with Diego, spoke fluent Spanish, and had forgotten his past. He was now Antonio Jimenez, with no memory of his former life. Diego and Lucia, who had found him after his kidnapping, kept his true identity a secret, knowing revealing it would endanger their lives. Their village, controlled by a ruthless cartel, had seen other children vanish without a trace, so they kept quiet, protecting Antonio, while his odd dreams of a ship, a crying woman, and a penguin left him unsettled. Then one day, everything changed. Antonio was walking with Lucia when he saw a man with a camera leading a small boy. A sharp pain shot through his head as flashes of memories flooded his head. A hand in his, an explosion, and a penguin falling. He turned to Lucia, but her pale face silenced. He was Andrew Hart, the missing American child. Unable to sleep, Andrew dialed the number in Diego's old address book. His hands trembled as it rang, and a calm voice answered, "Detective Garcia speaking. How can I help you?" I need to report something. I saw a man on the cruise ship, before the explosion. He had a camera, and I remember penguins." There was a pause. "Penguins?" "Yes," Andrew said, his heart racing. "And an explosion. I was with my mom." "Where are you?" Garcia demanded. "I'm in Colombia. I remember everything now." "Andrew Hart?" she asked, her voice suddenly tight. "Yes. How do you—" "I've been looking for you for 10 years. Stay put. We're coming." When the call ended, Maria let out a huge sigh of relief. She'd never imagined this moment would come. The missing boy from the Majestic Caribbean cruise had been found, and this time, she wasn't going to let him disappear again. At the hospital, Officer Garcia handed him a photo of his younger self holding Mister Waddles, his stuffed penguin. The rest of his memories hit like a flood, his mother's voice, the ocean breeze, and the sound of laughter. But that laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by the need to protect Diego and Lucia, the people who had kept him safe all these years. Andrew looked at Garcia, his face serious. "I have to make sure Diego and Lucia are safe. They've protected me for so long." Garcia nodded. "I understand, but you need to focus on getting back home first. We'll make sure they're protected." The flight back to Connecticut was a blur. What would his family think? Would they still love him? Would they even recognize him? The uncertainty lingered as the plane touched down in the cold, rainy night. Standing outside his parents' home, Andrew hesitated. The rain poured down, soaking him through. He could see the lights inside, but everything felt too big, too overwhelming. What would happen when they saw him? Would they even believe it was him? He stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, just staring at the door, his heart racing in his chest. Suddenly, the door opened. Michael stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked at Andrew, the boy he had long believed lost, and his voice cracked when he spoke. "Andrew, is it really you?" Andrew nodded, tears filling his own eyes. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to leave." Michael stepped forward slowly, his hands trembling as he reached out. Without saying another word, he pulled Andrew into a tight embrace. His voice was thick with emotion. "I thought I'd never see you again. I never stopped looking for you." Susan appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Her eyes locked on Andrew and she gasped. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she dropped her coffee cup. The ceramic shattered on the floor, but she didn't seem to notice. "Andrew," she whispered, taking a step forward. Then, without hesitation, she rushed to him, throwing her arms around him. "I thought you were gone forever," she sobbed, holding him just as tightly as Michael had. "I missed you so much. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." Andrew, overwhelmed with emotion, squeezed his parents back. "You never gave up on me. No, Susan interrupted, her voice breaking. "We never stopped loving you, Andrew. Never. And now, you're home." The three of them stood there, tears mingling as they held each other. No more words were needed. The love, relief, and healing were in the embrace. Well, what do you think about Andrew's story? Do you believe that he could have been rescued the same day he was kidnapped? The universe is a vast and mysterious place, full of secrets that keep us intrigued and curious about our own existence here on Earth. One story that has captured people's imaginations is the tale of Mel's Hole. It all began on a radio show called Coast to Coast AM on February 21st, 1997, when a man named Mel Waters called in to narrate his discovery of a strange hole in a rural property he bought near Ellensburg, Washington. Coast to Coast AM is a radio show known for exploring strange and paranormal phenomena. It's the kind of show that taps into our fascination with things that can't be easily explained. So when Mel shared his story about an unexplainable hole, it grabbed the attention of listeners around the world. It was like opening a new chapter in the exploration of the mysteries that our planet holds. Mel's was no mere hole. It was a bottomless hole that seemed to scare everyone who lived around it. Just 80 miles outside of Ellensburg, Washington, in the small town of Manistash, there lies a mystifying cavity known as Mel's Hole. This strange opening in the earth has perplexed the locals for decades, but no one more so than Mel Waters himself.
Many locals claim to know about the hole, but it didn't really become a phenomenon until 1997, when Mel Waters went on the Coast to Coast radio show with Art Bell.
You see, Mel moved onto the rural property in the 1990s, completely unaware of the uncanny happenings surrounding his new land. Get girded, because in a few minutes we are going to embark on a terrifying ride about one of the many mysteries of our Earth. What terrifying discovery was made in Mel's Hole? At first, Mel was told by neighbors that the hole had been used for decades as a dumping ground for all sorts of undesirable trash and broken machinery. But here's the eerie part. No matter how much junk and waste the townspeople dumped into its depths, the hole never seemed to fill up. In fact, if you peered over the edge, all you could see was pitch blackness, no sign of a bottom whatsoever. Stranger still, not a single sound echoed back, even if you dropped large, heavy objects down its throat. Once Mel started living there, even weirder stuff started happening around the hole. There were screams and howls late at night. Strange lights flickered up from inside it. Things would disappear if you left them near the hole. Mel got totally obsessed with figuring out what was up with this bottomless pit, and the more he studied it, the more scary secrets he uncovered. On his quest to uncover the mystery of the hole, he first set out to uncover the reason behind the hole not filling up. So he started conducting experiments to get a sense of just how deep it went. First, he began dropping heavy tools into its dark depths, hoping to hear them hit the bottom with a thud or splash, but each time, all he heard was silence. No matter how heavy the object, not a single sound echoed back up. It was almost as if the objects just vanished into thin air. This really made Mel scratch his head in curiosity. Typically, when you drop something down a deep hole, you expect some noise, a dull thump if it's hitting solid ground, or a splash if there's water below. But the void-like silence from Mel's hole defied logic. This led Mel to wonder, could this pit truly have no bottom at all? Not one to give up easily, Mel came up with a clever idea using candy and a fishing line. He attached some sweets to the end of a long line and lowered it into the blackness. If the candy came back up dissolved, that would mean there was water at the bottom. But if it returned with dirt stuck to it, that would indicate a dry surface down below. After exhausting about 1,500 feet of line, Mel drew the candy back up. Shockingly, it was still perfectly intact. Feeling he was onto something, Mel bought spool after spool of fishing line and tied them together. Once again, he began lowering the line into the pit, but the hole just kept swallowing up more and more lines, with no end in sight. After what must have been miles and miles of line, Mel checked and realized over 80,000 feet had disappeared into the darkness. That's when Mel knew for sure that there was no ordinary cavity in the ground. This was a genuine bottomless pit of the most perplexing order. Mel now felt certain this was no ordinary hole. He knew he had to share this with the world. And so he contacted his friend Art Bell, host of a paranormal radio talk show. He pleaded with Art to help him get conclusive proof of the hole's seemingly endless depth. Together, they came up with more elaborate tests. They lowered two-way radios, hoping to pick up voices from the other side. They dropped glowing flares and cameras hooked to monitors, attempting to catch a glimpse of what lay beneath. Just like the others, the camera went down and kept extending hundreds and hundreds of feet until it disappeared into the murky blackness. But the camera picked up no sign of an end. The instruments confirmed it. This was a genuine bottomless pit. The mysterious hole on Mel's property had everyone scratching their heads. Speculation arose about what could possibly be down there in that deep, dark void. Mel's friend Art suggested they lower someone down to investigate, suspended by a line and pulley for safety. But Mel wasn't so sure about that idea. He had two major concerns. First, what if the air down there was dangerous? There could be toxic gases or other hazards that could harm or even kill a person. Mel certainly didn't want to risk someone's life that way. Who knows what kinds of fumes have accumulated in that long, undisturbed pit. Even a short exposure might be fatal, and Mel refused to put someone in that kind of danger just to satisfy curiosity. Second, the paranormal events surrounding the hole made Mel uneasy about sending someone down there. What if they disappeared mysteriously or ended up dead? Mel feared anyone who went down there might fall victim to supernatural forces beyond their control. He pictured them suspended on that line, screaming for help as some unseen entity dragged them into the shadows below. Mel shivered just thinking about it. Despite those concerns, some daredevils volunteered to explore the hole anyway, but Mel stood firm and refused to allow it. He hoped there might be a way to satisfy the curiosity about the hole without endangering lives. Then, one day, something really strange happened. According to Mel, one of his neighbors had a hunting dog that died naturally. Instead of burying the dog properly, the owner just threw the body into the strange pit on Mel's property. but incredibly, just a few days later, the hunter saw his dead dog, looking healthy and alive, running toward the woods. The dog showed no signs of injury or decay. It was like it had never died at all. The strangest of all is that even though the dog had been very attached to its owner when alive, it didn't respond when the hunter called out or whistled. It was as if the revived dog had no memory of its former companion. Mel said the neighbor whistled over and over for the dog he thought was his, but the dog totally ignored him. It was like this living ghost had no loyalty or memory of its previous master. The hunter was certain this was the same dog. The collar proved it was his, but the dog acted like a completely different animal. This weird story raises many questions. Did the dog somehow come back to life after being tossed in the pit? Did the hole's strange energy restore the dead body? Or did the grieving owner only imagine he saw his dead pet? Could he have mistaken some other similar dog for his own? Before long, Mel's hole had transformed from a local curiosity into a full-blown paranormal phenomenon. To lay credence to his claim, a man named Red Elk had some wild stories about Mel's mysterious hole. Red Elk was actually named Gerald Osborne, and he was a Native American medicine man. Back in 1961, when Red Elk was young, his dad apparently showed him this crazy deep hole called Mel's Hole. Back in the 1960s, a Native American medicine man named Red Elk claimed to have stumbled upon a crazy deep hole in rural Washington state that locals called Mel's Hole. Apparently, his own father first showed him the endless pit back in 1961, and since then, he said every time he visited this hole, the strangest things would happen. He was convinced the area was confused with what he called the Devil's Hole. The story got really fascinating when he revealed the government had a top-secret underground base near Mel's Hole. He even said he witnessed alien activity around the area, including a massive alien spacecraft hovering over the hole during the summer solstice. Red Elk described seeing bizarre alien creatures and unusual animals around the hole that seemed to have the power to rejuvenate living beings. He was certain the hole was some kind of portal to other dimensions or realms, like a doorway to different realms or something. So, was Mel's Hole a true gateway to the paranormal, or just an old Native American legend? The wild claims of spacecraft and aliens make it hard to know what to believe. But Red Elk seemed convinced this strange pit held mystical secrets. To make matters interesting, a group of Native Americans in Nevada, on hearing his story, reached out to mention that they also had a similar hole to Mel's Hole known as the Devil's Gate, or Satan's Hole. According to them, the hole is a gateway to the spirit realm, a sacred site inhabited by supernatural beings and souls of the underworld. Those who were brave enough to stand at its edge attested to hearing unsettling whispers, humming, and even voices speaking in foreign tongues from the depths. Others even claimed to have seen ghostly lights and shadows moving around the hole's edges, while some said they felt really disoriented, like they experienced some kind of time warp near the pit. While others claimed that radios that were taken close to the hole would all of a sudden start playing records of past decades, which really was strange. Upon hearing of Mel's mysterious hole, many people came up with all kinds of different theories to explain that weird Mel's Hole. One theory says maybe the hole connects to some huge underground cave system deep in the earth that's super hot, like from lava or volcanoes. That could be why Mel said he felt intense heat coming from the hole. Some posit the hole is actually an alien portal, with extraterrestrial beings secretly traveling to and from it, while the government turns a blind eye or is covering it up. They believe the hole is really a portal to outer space that aliens use, and the government knows about it, but won't admit it. Others insist it is the site of top-secret experimental projects by military scientists, considering it close to the military base Yakima. But evidence supporting these claims remains circumstantial at best. Skeptical minds contend the whole affair is nothing but an elaborate tall tale or hoax meant to stoke intrigue. They highlight the lack of verified scientific examination of the hole to back up the extraordinary stories. For some, its purported bottomless depths and strange abilities hint at a passageway to a hollow earth. According to them, the hole goes down so deep it reaches the inside of the earth, which some people believe is hollow. So it could be an entrance down there. Meanwhile, more supernatural-minded theorists have suggested the hole could serve as a portal through space and time itself, a gateway to parallel dimensions, time travel, or other planes of existence, which, to an extent, seems to explain why the dog we mentioned earlier didn't seem to recognize his owner despite the owner's efforts to call his attention. Government agents began monitoring the area. Scientists launched expeditions to recover experimental equipment supposedly lost in its depths. Yet the true nature of this portal in the Earth continued to elude understanding. After narrating his ordeal and discovery on the podcast, when Mel got home that day, he was shocked to find armed military personnel had blocked off the road to his property. They seemed to be conducting some secret operation on his land. He saw guys in hazmat suits moving around. Curious to know why the military was there or what they wanted, he asked. But they claimed a plane had crashed there. The strange thing is, upon looking around, he didn't see any debris, smoke, or anything indicating a crash. Smelling something fishy, Mel asked to speak to the person in charge. Not only did they refuse him, but they threatened him too, and even added that the land wasn't really his, and they could easily take it from him. Of course, no one was going to take it lightly, so he threatened to go to the press. But to his utmost shock, the uniformed man scoffed at him and dared Mel to do his worst, confidently telling him that even if Mel went to the media, nobody would believe him anyway. On his next appearance at the podcast, he recapped this shocking military invasion to his friend Art Bell. Things got interesting, so Art Bell invited Mel back on the show. During this follow-up, Mel dropped more juicy details. He revealed he'd just heard from his real estate agent that someone was very interested in buying his property for a mouth-watering amount of money. Even to a toddler, this seemed suspicious, especially as it was coming right after the military takeover of Mel's home. This is where it gets weird. During this back and forth, he mysteriously disappeared. This got many worried because where could he have gone to, considering that the case wasn't solved? Remember, Mel claimed armed military officers took over his land and even threatened him the last time he was on Art Bell's show. Well, Mel resurfaced on Coast to Coast again in April 2000 with more crazy details. He told Art's listeners that back in 1997, he had leased the property with the hole to an unnamed person, forget this, $3 million a year in perpetuity. Wild, right? But there was a catch. Part of the deal was Mel had to go live in Australia. However, Mel broke the agreement and came back to the US in 1999. When he returned, Mel claimed he was kidnapped off a bus near Olympia. When he finally woke up 12 days later in San Francisco, he had an IV scar and surgical tape on his arm. Even crazier, his rear molars, wallet, and belt buckle were missing. And it wasn't just any belt buckle. Mel said it was specially made with 3 rare Roosevelt dimes he found near the hole. He was convinced the government put a tracking device in his teeth, too. Now, some of Art's fans started poking holes in Mel's story at this point. They pointed out Roosevelt wasn't on the dime until 1946, the year after he died. And there's no C mint mark, which shows the coin's origin. Here's where it gets really insane. In his response, Mel claimed the dimes and gun were from a parallel universe. One where Roosevelt died before 1943, Germany won World War II, and the dimes were minted in Berlin. After this section, like the first time, Mel disappeared into the thin air again, and this time, since then, he hasn't been found. However, there was something that was found in his hole that scientists claimed posed a risk to the planet. This is where this whole tale becomes even more chilling. What terrifying effects could the discovery in Mel's hole have on nature? In one of his confessions, Mel said he saw what looked like a thick, dark beam coming out of a hole on his property. He described it as a black searchlight reaching up into the sky, and that this weird black stuff seemed to suck the light around it, kind of like a black hole swallowing everything near it. Scientists will tell you that black holes are typically formed from the collapse of massive stars. Now, let's imagine a wild situation where a black hole suddenly shows up on Earth. If a black hole appeared here, it would be a huge disaster for our planet. Black holes have such intense gravity that anything near them gets pulled in fast. The gravitational effects of a black hole are mind-blowing. This giant would have such an incredibly strong pull that it would make anything we've ever experienced seem puny. Not even light can escape. Near the black hole, gravity would start stretching and squashing stuff into long, thin strands. Scientists call this spaghettification, and it's as unpleasant as it sounds. People and buildings would be mangled into noodle-like shapes before getting sucked into the black hole. As the black hole gobbled up more of Earth, its powerful gravity would totally wreck our planet's surface. Entire cities and landscapes would get warped and destroyed. Violent earthquakes, insane winds, and epic volcanic eruptions would reshape Earth's crust. Coasts would collapse and mountains would crumble. Once the Earth passes a certain point called the event horizon, there's no turning back. Anything that crosses this boundary, including Earth, would be trapped forever. The event horizon is like a point of no escape, where even light itself can't get out. It would be a pitch-black void, impossible to see or measure anything from inside. Now let's consider the impact on Earth's structure. The black hole's enormous gravitational force would cause utter chaos. Tidal forces would go haywire, causing massive earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and major changes to the planet's surface. Our planet's orbit and rotation would go haywire under the black hole's pull. The climate would wildly change into something unlivable. Oceans would overflow their basins as Earth spins, causing massive floods. The air would become scorching hot in some places and frigid cold in others. Even man-made objects orbiting our planet would go berserk thanks to the black hole's gravity. Spacecraft would spin off course and hurtle back to Earth. Satellites would be tossed around like toys before falling from the sky. As the black hole feeds on more of our planet, radiation and energy bursts like intense radiation, and supercharged particles would blast out from its center. These deadly emissions would fry Earth's surface and strip away our protective atmosphere. Any people or animals left alive would get bombarded by cancer-causing rays. A disk of super-hot, doomed matter would swirl around the black hole before getting sucked down its bottomless pit. From space, Earth would look like water vanishing down a cosmic drain. Eventually, our entire planet would get gobbled up by the black hole until nothing human-made remained. So you see why we say the Earth is a mystery box that makes our existence on Earth interesting. Did you think the story of Mel and his hole has ended? Not yet. So it turns out there were major holes in Waters' wild stories. First off, there's no record of anyone named Mel Waters ever living in Kittitas County, and people have searched every inch of Manistash Ridge without finding a trace of the hole. Jack Powell, a geologist with the State Department of Natural Resources at the time, told the Ellensburg Daily Record he thought he knew the real inspiration for Mel's tall tale. Northwest of Ellensburg, there was an old gold mine shaft in a field that might go down 300 feet at most. Powell theorized old Mel knew about this hole on private property and spun it into a sensational story. Powell was highly skeptical of Mel's claims. In 2001, a Seattle discussion group that later became the Seattle Paranormal Society contacted Powell about Mel's hole. He took them out to what he believed was the shaft behind the legend. Powell explained the local geology and why a bottomless pit was impossible. Stephen Rydell, a retired geology professor from Washington State University, also visited the purported Mel's Hole site. Like Powell, Rydell said a hole of the depth Waters described was physically impossible. As Rydell put it, the Earth's pressure would have sealed it off in no time at all. The whole area is under north-south pressure, and we have the ridges because of that. For comparison, the deepest hole ever drilled is the 230-foot Kola Super Deep borehole in northwest Russia. And that took 20 years and specialized equipment. Do you believe Mel's hole actually is folklore, or it actually did exist? But some people made sure to cover it up because it was going to expose other top secrets about our planet? Thank you for staying with us in this episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this matter, so please share them in the comments section below. And don't forget to like and click the subscribe button to be notified about our next video. You're going to love it. Leave your opinions in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.